You have ever had that strange feeling that something inside you is changing but you cannot put it into words? That inexplicable discomfort when your certainties begin to crumble, when the world you knew suddenly seems too small for the person you are becoming? It is like your brain is reorganizing itself behind the scenes, and you feel the tension of that transformation in every thought that no longer closes, in every ready answer that suddenly sounds empty. You look at your own ideas and they seem strange, like clothes that no longer fit. This is not confusion. This is not crisis. This is the prelude to something much deeper. Your brain is about to make a cognitive leap, and you are feeling the signs of this internal earthquake that will completely change the way you think, understand, and exist in the world. And here is the problem nobody tells you about. While you are in this cognitive limbo, you feel completely lost. Your relationships become tense because you no longer think as before. You do not react as they expected. You no longer fit into conversations that used to make sense. At work, you question everything, and this bothers those who prefer certainties. You feel displaced from your own life, as if you were watching from outside while an old version of you tries to function in an operating system that no longer runs. Self-esteem plummets because you interpret this disorder as failure, as if you were regressing when in fact you are about to evolve. Mental fatigue is brutal because your brain is working in overdrive to reorganize entire thought schemes. And the worst part is that you do not know this is normal, that this chaos has a name, that Jean Piaget dedicated his entire life to understanding exactly this process that is happening inside you right now. The most revolutionary discovery of Piaget was not about children learning to count or speak. It was about how the human mind, at any age, completely reorganizes itself when it encounters information that simply no longer fits into old thought structures. And why this means that every time you feel this intense cognitive discomfort, you are not losing your mind. You are about to gain an entirely new mind. Today I will show you the 6 scientific signs that Piaget identified as markers that your mind is on the threshold of a real cognitive leap. Those rare moments when you not only learn something new, but transform the very structure that allows you to learn. This is not empty self-help. This is developmental neuroscience applied to your life right now. Piaget began his journey observing his own children in the 1920s, but it was a specific case in 1946 that changed everything. He was working with an 8-year-old boy in Geneva who insisted that if you took 2 rows of coins with the same number of pieces and spread one of them out, the longer row had more coins. The boy was not stupid. He was brilliant, but something in his cognitive structure simply did not allow him to conserve the notion of quantity when physical appearance changed. Piaget was fascinated not by the error, but by the process. He began to document, hour after hour, day after day, the exact moment when this boy started to hesitate, to frown, to count and recount, to enter that state of cognitive discomfort that Piaget would call disequilibrium. And then, on a rainy Thursday, the boy stopped in the middle of the task and said something that Piaget wrote down word by word. Wait. It does not matter how you put them. It is still the same number because you did not take away or add any. That was not mechanical learning. It was a leap. The entire mental structure reorganized itself. Piaget realized he was witnessing not just a child learning, but the human mind rebuilding itself in real time. The first sign that Piaget identified is what he called persistent disequilibrium. It is not passing doubt. It is when you encounter information, an experience, an idea that simply does not fit into any mental drawer you have. And instead of ignoring it as you always did, this time you cannot. That keeps hammering. You go back to it again and again. It is like having a stone in your shoe that you cannot remove, but the stone is inside your head. Piaget observed this in hundreds of children and later in adults he followed for decades. A 32-year-old woman he studied in 1953 was absolutely certain that people from other cultures thought exactly like her, just with different words. Then she spent 3 months in a village in Africa and came back completely destabilized. She could no longer fit what she had seen into her old categories. People did not think like her with different words. They organized time, space, relationships, the very notion of self in ways that broke all her schemas. And she could not ignore it. She spent 2 years in that discomfort, going back to that experience, trying to force the old pieces to fit, until finally her mind reorganized itself at a totally new level of understanding. This persistent disequilibrium is the first warning that your brain is preparing for a structural transformation. If you are feeling this now, with some idea that does not leave your head, some experience that does not fit, you are on the right path. Your brain is not disturbing you, it is evolving you. The second sign is what Piaget called failed and conscious assimilation attempts. Assimilation is when you take new information and fit it into structures you already have. It is like putting a new book on an old shelf. It works most of the time. But sometimes you try to force a book that simply does not fit, and you know it does not fit. But you keep trying because the alternative is to admit you need a new shelf, and that takes work. Piaget documented a fascinating case in 1957 of a teenager who had grown up in an extremely religious family with ready answers for everything. God created everything. Everything has divine purpose. There is no chance. Then he started studying evolutionary biology and got stuck in a brutal mental loop. He tried to fit natural selection into divine design. He tried to explain random mutations as part of a plan. He spent hours rewriting scientific concepts to make them fit into the religious structures he already had. And the most important thing, he knew he was doing this. It was not unconscious denial. It was conscious failed assimilation. He saw the cracks. He felt the tension. But he kept trying because giving up the attempt meant accepting that he would have to rebuild entire mental structures that supported his identity. This lasted almost 4 years. And then, in a class on speciation, something clicked. He stopped trying to fit. He allowed the accommodation. His cognitive structure expanded to hold both scientific understanding and spiritual meaning without forcing one into the molds of the other. That is the power of recognizing conscious failed assimilation. When you catch yourself twisting new information to fit old structures, when you feel the strain of that forcing, you are not being stubborn. You are standing at the edge of cognitive transformation. Your mind is showing you where it needs to grow. The third sign Piaget identified is increased metacognitive awareness. That is a fancy way of saying you start thinking about your own thinking. You catch yourself mid-thought and realize your reasoning does not make sense. You notice patterns in how you process information. You become aware of your own biases and mental shortcuts in real time. Piaget observed this intensely in a study he conducted in 1961 with university students learning formal operational thought. One student, a 20-year-old studying philosophy, kept a journal that Piaget analyzed. She wrote about noticing how she would jump to conclusions, how she would accept arguments that confirmed what she already believed without examining them, how she would dismiss contradicting evidence with flimsy excuses. The fascinating part was not that she did these things. Everyone does. The fascinating part was that she became acutely aware of doing them. She would write entries like, "Today I realized I have been avoiding reading that article because I am afraid it will prove me wrong about something I built my thesis on." That level of metacognitive awareness was painful for her. It made thinking slower, more deliberate, more exhausting. But Piaget recognized it as the hallmark of a mind preparing to reorganize. When you become conscious of your own cognitive processes, you gain the ability to change them. It is like suddenly being able to see the operating system of your own mind, instead of just the programs running on it. If you are experiencing this now, if you are catching yourself in mental patterns you never noticed before, if you are questioning your own reasoning process itself, you are not overthinking. You are developing the capacity for higher-order cognition. Your brain is giving you access to the controls. The fourth sign is what Piaget termed productive confusion with specific triggers. Not all confusion is equal. Sometimes we are confused because we lack information. Sometimes we are confused because something is poorly explained. But the confusion that signals cognitive leap is different. It has a signature. It happens when you encounter specific triggers that expose the limitations of your current cognitive framework. Piaget documented this beautifully in his work with adolescents moving into formal operational thinking. He would present them with hypothetical scenarios, with abstract problems that required thinking about thinking, with situations that demanded they consider multiple perspectives simultaneously. A 16-year-old girl he worked with in 1955 was asked to imagine a society where lying was considered moral and honesty was punished. She could not do it at first. She got angry, said it was stupid, insisted the question itself was wrong. But the confusion kept working on her. She came back to it. She tried to reason through it. She felt that specific kind of confusion, where the problem is not that you do not understand the question, but that the question is revealing something about how you think that you never examined before. 3 weeks later, she came back and said, "I understand now. I was not confused about lying and honesty. I was confused because I had never separated my moral feelings from logical analysis. I can now think about systems of morality without automatically judging them." That breakthrough came directly from productive confusion with a specific trigger. If you are experiencing confusion that keeps pulling you back, that irritates you because it feels like it is pointing to something you should understand but cannot quite grasp, lean into it. That confusion is your mind's way of showing you where the next level of thinking begins. Hola, you are not alone in feeling like your thoughts are unraveling. Have you ever noticed yourself defending an idea you are not even sure you believe anymore? Just because admitting you were wrong feels like losing a piece of yourself? I know how it is. That moment when you realize your mind is changing and it feels more like betrayal than growth. If this resonates with you, leave a simple comment. My mind is reorganizing and it feels terrifying. Your experience can be exactly what someone needs to read today to feel less alone. You have more healing power than you imagine. The fifth sign Piaget identified is pattern recognition at a higher order. You start seeing connections you never saw before. Not just between similar things, but between concepts that seemed completely unrelated in your old cognitive framework. Piaget noticed this in his later work in the 1960s, when he studied how scientists make breakthrough discoveries. He interviewed dozens of researchers who had made significant contributions to their fields and found a common pattern. Right before their breakthroughs, they all reported a period where they started seeing their field differently. A biologist Piaget interviewed in 1964 said he had been stuck on a problem about cell division for 2 years. Then one day, while watching his daughter play with building blocks, he suddenly saw the parallel between how she was organizing her blocks by trial and error and how cells might be regulating division through feedback mechanisms. The connection was not obvious. Building blocks and cell biology seem worlds apart, but his mind was operating at a level where it could abstract the underlying pattern and apply it across domains. That is, higher-order pattern recognition. It is not about seeing more. It is about seeing deeper structures. If you are starting to notice that conversations about one topic make you think about completely different topics, if you are drawing analogies that surprise even you, if you are connecting dots that nobody else seems to see, your mind is not wandering. It is ascending. You are developing the capacity to think at a more abstract, more integrated level. This is how genuine insight works. This is how paradigm shifts happen. Not by learning more facts, but by reorganizing how facts relate to each other at a fundamental level. The sixth sign is tolerance for ambiguity, with simultaneous search for resolution. This seems contradictory, but it is the most sophisticated marker of cognitive development Piaget identified. You become able to hold contradictory ideas without immediate discomfort, but you also maintain an active drive to integrate them. It is not apathy or relativism. It is the capacity to sit with complexity while working toward coherence. Piaget observed this most clearly in his final major work in the 1970s, studying how people develop what he called reflective abstraction. He followed a group of adults over 5 years who were all grappling with major life transitions. One man, a 40-year-old engineer, had always seen the world in binary terms. Things worked, or they did not. Plans succeeded or failed. People were competent or incompetent. Then he went through a divorce, a career change, and the death of a parent within 2 years. His binary framework shattered. But instead of collapsing into nihilism or clinging harder to his old categories, something remarkable happened. He developed the ability to hold multiple truths simultaneously. He could acknowledge that his marriage both failed and taught him profound things about himself. He could see that his career change was both a loss of stability and an opening to growth. He could recognize that his parents' death was both devastating and somehow necessary in the larger arc of life. And he was not satisfied with just holding these contradictions. He was actively working to understand how they fit together at a higher level of meaning. That is the sixth sign. When you find yourself able to say, "This is true, and its opposite is also true, and I'm going to figure out how both can be true at once," you are operating at a level of cognition that most people never reach. Your mind is not confused. It is sophisticated enough to handle the real complexity of existence while maintaining the drive to make sense of it. Now let me take you back to that boy with the coins in Geneva in 1946. After his breakthrough, Piaget continued to work with him for 3 more years. What he discovered changed everything he thought he knew about cognitive development. The boy did not just learn conservation of number. His entire way of relating to the world transformed. He started questioning things he had accepted without thought. He began testing his own reasoning. He developed curiosity about his own mind. Years later, when the boy was 15, Piaget interviewed him and asked if he remembered that rainy Thursday. The boy, now a young man, said something Piaget quoted in multiple papers. "That was the day I learned I could think about my thinking. Everything changed after that. I was not just in the world anymore. I could step back and understand how I was seeing the world. It felt like waking up." That is what a cognitive leap does. It does not just add new information. It transforms the very apparatus of understanding. And here is what Piaget spent his entire career proving. This capacity is not fixed. It is not over after childhood. Your mind can keep reorganizing, keep expanding, keep leaping to higher levels of sophistication for your entire life. But only if you pay attention to the signs and allow the process to unfold. What Piaget understood that most people miss is that cognitive development is not comfortable. It requires you to tolerate the death of old certainties before new structures emerge. It demands that you sit in confusion without rushing to false clarity. It asks that you notice when your mind is straining against its own limitations and let that strain do its work. Every time you feel that persistent disequilibrium, that failed assimilation, that metacognitive awareness, that productive confusion, that higher order pattern recognition, that tolerance for ambiguity, you are not experiencing symptoms of a problem. You are experiencing symptoms of growth. Your mind is not breaking, it is breaking through. And the difference between people who make these leaps and people who stay stuck in the same cognitive frameworks for decades is simple. The ones who leap recognize these signs for what they are. They lean into the discomfort. They trust the process. They give themselves permission to not know while their minds reorganize. They understand that confusion is not the enemy of clarity. It is the price of admission to the next level of clarity. Think about where you are right now. What persistent disequilibrium are you feeling? What idea keeps bothering you that does not fit your current understanding? What assimilation are you failing at because deep down you know? The information is too big for your current structures. What are you noticing about your own thinking that you never saw before? What confusion keeps pulling you back with that specific signature that it is pointing to something important? What patterns are you starting to see that connect things you thought were separate? What contradictions are you learning to hold while searching for how they integrate? If you can identify even one of these signs in your current experience, you are not stuck. You are not regressing. You are not losing your mind. You are standing exactly where that 8-year-old boy stood on that rainy Thursday in Geneva. You are at the edge of a cognitive leap, and what you do next determines everything. You can resist it, try to force yourself back into old frameworks that no longer fit, exhaust yourself trying to think in ways that your mind is outgrowing. Or you can recognize this for what it is. You can honor the process. You can give yourself the grace to be in transition. You can trust that your mind knows what it is doing even when you do not. Piaget spent 60 years documenting one central truth. The human mind is not a container that fills up with information. It is a living structure that rebuilds itself when necessary, and it rebuilds itself through specific, identifiable processes. You are not mysterious to yourself. You are observable. You can learn to recognize the signs of your own transformation. You can become conscious of the very mechanisms of consciousness, and when you do that, you gain something invaluable. You gain the ability to cooperate with your own development instead of resisting it. You gain patience with yourself during the difficult transitions. You gain trust in the process even when it feels like chaos. You gain the understanding that every moment of cognitive discomfort is your mind asking permission to evolve, and all you have to do is say yes. The journey you are on right now, the confusion you are feeling, the questions that will not leave you alone, the sense that your old ways of thinking are not working anymore. This is not evidence that something is wrong with you. This is evidence that something is right with you. Your mind is healthy enough to recognize its own limitations. Your consciousness is sophisticated enough to notice when it is ready for the next level. Your brain is doing exactly what healthy brains do when they encounter complexity that exceeds current capacity. It is preparing to reorganize. It is gathering resources. It is getting ready to make a leap. And the most important thing Piaget ever taught is this: you do not make the leap by trying harder with your old structures. You make the leap by recognizing the signs, honoring the process, and allowing the transformation to happen. Your mind already knows how to do this. It has been doing this your entire life. Every time you went from not understanding something to understanding it at a deep level, every time your perspective shifted and you could never go back to seeing things the old way, every time you had an insight that changed everything, your mind was using these exact processes. And it is happening again, right now. The signs are there. The process has started. The only question is whether you will recognize it and work with it, or fight it and make it harder than it needs to be. You have shown incredible courage just by being here, seeking to understand what is happening inside your mind. That takes a level of self-awareness that many people never develop. You are not just living your life. You are examining it. You are trying to understand how you understand. And that itself is proof that you are already in the process of cognitive transformation. This is not where your journey ends. This is where it deepens. If you want to continue discovering these insights about how your mind works, how consciousness develops, how you can cooperate with your own growth instead of resisting it, join us here. Every week we explore the mechanisms of human development that Piaget and others have mapped. We go deep into the processes that most people never learn to recognize in themselves. We build a community of people who are actively engaged in their own cognitive evolution. This is not about collecting information. This is about transforming the very structure that processes information. The button below is your first step into understanding yourself at a level most people never reach. We will be here, exploring these territories together, discovering what our minds are truly capable of when we learn to recognize and honor their natural development processes. And if you want to go even deeper into how Piaget understood the specific mechanisms of accommodation, how your brain physically reorganizes during these cognitive leaps, and why some people get stuck at certain developmental stages while others keep evolving throughout their entire lives, that is exactly what we are exploring next. The neuroscience behind cognitive restructuring is even more fascinating than the psychology. Your brain is not just changing its mind, it is literally rewiring its neural networks. And once you understand how that works, you gain even more power to facilitate your own development. We will see you there, ready to take the next leap together.